Friends, I welcome you to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It is not difficult for you, but it is pleasant for me. And we're starting. Jody and I spent our honeymoon in America, in the cheerful old town of A. In fact, I wanted to go to the West Indies, maybe to Martinique, but of course I was passed over and, as often happens, I did not regret it at all. We took off on a British Airways flight from Heathrow and landed at Kennedy Airport a few hours later, trying but failing miserably to join the Mile High Club on the way. It didn't matter, as we soon made up for lost time traveling along the East Coast, exploring New England and the surrounding area. Coming from Huntingdon in Cambridgeshire near Cambridge University, we especially enjoyed our visit to Yale and Harvard. But the biggest surprise was how wonderful and rural New York State was. Not at all what we expected. 3 weeks later, Jody and I were undoubtedly making love in more motels than the average American would have been able to in his entire life. We enjoyed every minute and swore to each other on the return plane that we would be back soon. Great plan. Great idea. But of course, real life and our careers just got in the way. 9 years have passed, and Dave Martin and my wife Jody and I have discovered that we are in our early 30s, happily married, have no children, and have a beautiful house mortgaged to the fullest, like most people in our position at that time. But we live a full life. I was recently appointed as a junior director of Allscans Limited, which specialized in high-tech incinerators, in which we were leading the world in our narrow sector. We were a small company, but we were growing, and I managed to grow with her. Under the guidance of my boss, George, who actually owned the company, I was probably number 4 or 5 in line. Jody worked pretty well, but as a school teacher, her career advancement depended on both work experience and abilities, and only sometimes did she get upset that I was ahead of her. Later, I wondered if it wasn't some kind of hidden feeling of jealousy that made her do what she did. I would say without a doubt that we still loved each other, perhaps not with the passion that we had when we first got married, but that was to be expected. Our personal life wasn't bad at all, with 1 to 2 weeks of abstinence when we were both under pressure, offset by a more frequent burst of activity when we were both in the mood. Our story begins when we were in the middle of a particularly long period of the first, but we are looking forward to a well-deserved period of the second. In fact, we hadn't taken any vacations for almost a year, but Jody had gone on vacation a week before, and we were supposed to go on a well-deserved vacation to the beaches of Spain the very next day. Jody pulled me out to buy new holiday clothes for the two of us, although, as expected, they bought 1 pair of shorts from me. Unsurprisingly, Jody ended up with 4 or 5 new outfits, and each one was more revealing than the previous one. Jody tended to be quite adventurous and headstrong on vacation, wearing and doing things she probably wouldn't normally do at home. I suppose she had already got into the festive spirit that day, and the blouse she chose seemed to reflect that fact exactly. "Do you like it?" "What is it?" she asked, holding it up for my approval. "It's a little transparent," I said without any genuine disapproval. "Then this is exactly what I'm looking for," Jody told me. "I guess I'd better try it on." She disappeared from my field of vision into the locker room with a transparent black piece of satin, leaving me standing there with 6 or 7 other guys who, like me, were waiting for their wives or girlfriends. I wondered if Jody would decide for herself, or if she would come out and model it for me to see what I thought. I thought she was wearing a pretty revealing bra that morning, so if she went out, a few guys might have a little fun. She really came out, right into the waiting area. Don't look around the corner so that I come and look like some girls. However, I made a mistake about something, and it was a bra. It was probably the same short blouse she had put on that morning, but since she took it off to try on a blouse, it didn't really matter. Men's eyes, including my own, widened in surprise when Jody turned around, showing me a new blouse. Well, nominally for me. She was black. It was transparent. Other than that, what could I say? It was covering for her. Well, in a way, I guess. It adequately covered her up. Well, I really couldn't agree with that. What word or phrase was I looking for? It hid her... No. Protecting her assets? Of course not. She guarded her modesty almost completely. I couldn't honestly say that I was so upset, but she liked it. A cheeky cow. Jody bought a blouse and we went to the next store. And then we bought a new bikini, if you could describe it as such. She disappeared into the locker room and seemed in no hurry. Eventually, she pulled back the curtain and stood there so I could admire. Damn it. I found my heart racing as I stood and stared at her, realizing that at least a couple of other guys waiting nearby were watching her too. The Jody I have to describe is a pretty attractive young woman, about 5'3", pretty slim. "Where's the top?" I asked her when I could speak again. "We're going to Spain," Jody announced happily. "Who needs a bikini top there?" And so it really was. We were there a year ago, and after the first hour or two, my wife dropped her bikini top and joined many other women who were topless. As far as I know, she never worried about it again the whole time we were there. But a department store in Cambridge could hardly be called a beach in Spain. "Well, do you like it?" "What is it?" she demanded, arching her back slightly. "I love it," at least two of the fans watching me replied before I could say a word anyway. Jody giggled at the attention she was getting and turned to offer another angle. "Then can I have it?" She asked me while I was standing there, not sure if I should be embarrassed or excited by her show. "I'd give her one," one of the guys cheekily said, and everyone else laughed. "Okay, you can take this," I told her before things got out of hand. On the way home in the car, I thought about it. Normally, Jody wouldn't act like this, so something must have happened. My wife, Jody, was one of those strong-willed women, and when I did something that upset her, she felt she had to get herself back. 4 months ago, she flirted with one of her colleagues in front of me, and she ended up kissing him on the dance floor while I had to stand and watch them. I wasn't too sure where his hands were either, for that matter. After that, we had a dazzling fight over how she humiliated me in front of everyone, and all she had to say was that it was my fault. Obviously, I forgot that it was the anniversary of our first date a few days ago, and she decided to make me pay. The anniversary of our first date? When the hell was the last time we celebrated this, for God's sake? Then about a month after that, I came home late when we were supposed to go out for dinner. It only took half an hour or so because I was stuck in traffic on my way home from a meeting with a client in the north. 4 hours on the road, and an accident on the freeway earlier in the day delayed me. I even called to say I was going to be late, but it didn't help. By the time I got home, she had already left and left me a note saying she had canceled the dinner order. I have no idea where she's gone, just that she'll call me later so I can join her. The later turned out to be more than 3 hours later, and it wasn't so much an invitation to join her as a demand that I pick her up to take her home. I told her what I thought of her, and that she could damn well get home on her own. She left alone to return home on her own. A lot of guys here would be more than happy to bring me home, Dave. I just don't know how I could repay them for their kindness. Those were her exact words. When I got to the club, I was furious. It didn't help when I found Jody surrounded by a group of young people, most of whom were 5 years younger than her, and obviously hoping for a special end to the evening. The tight dress she was wearing did nothing to convince them that they had made the right choice, or to reassure me. When I approached the group, at least 3 of them were actually holding her hands, hugging her waist, her bare shoulder. "Excuse me, guys," I said, carefully making my way to her, somewhat carefully pushing their hands away from her body. "It's time for this little lady to come home." "Fuck off, buddy," one of them retorted, trying to push me away. "We grabbed her first. Go and find your own piece of crumpet." "It's all right, boys," Jody said. "It's my husband who came to save me. I'm sorry to interrupt the evening, but I'm afraid I'll have to go home with him." Oh my God. It looked like everything was going to turn out badly, and I didn't stand a chance against their group. They weren't happy. It was obvious that they thought Jody had tricked them, and that by prior arrangement I had come to pick up their funny thing, and 2 of them, including Stroppy, started pushing me. It has been several years since I was last involved in any kind of fight, not once since I was in high school. But I'm not one of those guys who backs off too easily, so I pushed them away. It started to get out of hand until Jody interrupted them again. "Come on, guys," she scolded them. "Leave him alone, please." It calmed them down a bit, but the atmosphere was still very threatening. "Now let's go," Jody continued, as if she liked the situation. "I'll give you all a good kiss goodnight, and then my husband and I have to go." It may have calmed them down, but it infuriated me. "You're not going to kiss any of them, Jody," I shouted at her. "And damn it, don't bother coming home tonight. Step back." The people around us began to disperse, and the bartender began to put away the glasses in front of us. Most of the young people seemed happy enough to step back and leave it, but the 2 troublemakers were just as furious as I was. There was going to be trouble, and I was in the thick of it. Suddenly, 2 huge bouncers appeared and started pushing us apart. I can't say that I wasn't relieved, although I was excited and would have gone for it. "You guys stay there," one of the bouncers told a group of young men, pushing them back before turning to us. "I suggest you get out of here, buddy, while you're still in one piece," he told me, and take the trouble to pick up this fool. There are times when you defend yourself, when your wife is insulted, and times when prudence is the best part of valor. I chose the second, easier option and dragged Jody along with me. Besides, at that moment, I agreed with his judgment. The drive home was quiet, but when we got home, we had another screaming fight. We barely spoke to each other for 3 days or so, and I warned her that if she ever did anything like this again, the consequences would be terrible. So, back to the locker room incidents and what caused them. Just a warning shot, she informed me. You know, I'm not happy that you're working tomorrow morning when we leave, so it was just a warning. Well, in my understanding, no matter how crazy a cow she is, there's a big difference between showing off her breasts to strangers and actually turning them on with her flirting, like she used to do. To tell the truth, it actually turned me on a lot, and the thought of Jody putting on her revealing clothes and going topless in a bikini in front of other guys on vacation made me ecstatic. In fact, it all depends on the degree. I never minded other guys watching, but touching was something completely different. The next day, I only had one meeting with Butch. Butch was one of those more-than-real guys who came from America to look at our products. My boss George was visiting them a couple of weeks ago and was coming back to see how we were working. My task was to quickly walk him through the production process and then take him to see how the factory was working. I planned to have a quick lunch with him and then leave so that I would have enough time to get home, change my clothes, and get to Stansted Airport in time to catch our afternoon flight. Jody was furious when I told her what I was going to do, demanding that I cancel my meeting with Butch and ask someone else to cover for me. I tried to explain how important this meeting was for our company and how entering the huge American market could lead to expansion for us and even greater prospects for me. She wasn't happy, and that was no doubt what led to the show the day before. "You're thinking more about your damn job than you are about me," she yelled at me when I refused to go along with her idea. I refused to remind her of the many times we had canceled arrangements because of her commitments at school, knowing that everything would be fine between us as soon as we boarded the plane. I knew Jody could be a little self-centered sometimes, but I knew that when I married her, so I could hardly complain. I patted her bottom as I left, gave her a peck on the cheek, and confirmed that she should be ready and packed when I get home in a few hours. "If you're a minute late, you're going to regret it," Jody spat out with a touch more fury than I thought was appropriate. The meeting went well, very well indeed. I found that I got along very well with Butch, having only met him very briefly during his previous visit a few months ago. He asked some extremely difficult questions, but I proved myself well, and when the morning came to an end, I was almost sure that we would confirm the order soon. "Then where are we going to have lunch?" He invited me around 11:30, and I suggested a local pub where we could have a quick snack and a beer. He came back to me. "Let's go to the place where Mario is, where we can sit a little quieter. I still have a number of things I need to go through with you." I looked at my watch, realized that I had some free time, and agreed. An hour later, we were only halfway through our meal, and he bombarded me with questions I could hardly believe. How much did he want to know about our company and our product, and for that matter, about me? "I'd better just call my wife and warn her that I might be a little late," I explained to him, heading to the bathroom, not wanting him to hear the explosion that would undoubtedly happen. Then I decided to wait another 10 minutes or so before reluctantly interrupting him and explaining why I had to leave. You should think twice before dumping such a potentially important client, but I still had some free time. "What are you doing?" Jody yelled at me on the phone when I told her, not ready to listen to my protests, that we still had free time. "I warned you, Dave, that if you were late, you'd regret it. I won't miss this holiday, even if I have to leave without you." I tried to calm her down, but to no avail. By the time I hung up, we were both mad at each other, and she stopped listening to what I had to say. I decided to just go back to Butch, explain my problem, and ask him if he could return to our factory on his own. It would have saved me 20 minutes or so, and I would have returned to my house, maybe only 5 minutes later than planned. Butch was a married man himself, and no doubt he would have understood. "Well, Dave," he greeted me when I returned to the table. "It's time for me to confess everything to you, because I know that you're in a hurry and you need to catch a plane." Oh shit, what does it all mean? How did he know that? What was he going to hit me with? I sat down and waited for the axe to come down, convinced that he was about to reject a new large order that I thought was in my pocket. How did he know I was in such a hurry? Obviously, I messed up everything by trying to speed things up. Why didn't I just tell him at the beginning of our meeting that I have a busy schedule that I have to follow? I want you to come and work for me, Dave, Butch said confidently. I had one of those moments where you just can't lift your chin and meet the rest of your face. Say it again, please, I demanded when I came to my senses. All these questions, Dave, I've been checking on you. George didn't tell you, but we're going to get a license to manufacture your plants in the USA, and we need someone with your knowledge to help us set it up. But, was all I could get out before Butch continued. George suggested you, Dave, as a manager. He certainly doesn't want to lose you, but this deal could make Alskins a fortune over the next decade or so, and he says you're the kind of person who can do it. Does George know? I asked listlessly. Of course he knows Dave, but he didn't want to talk too much until I met you and decided you were the man I needed. I leaned back in my chair with the most incredible warm feeling running through me. I'm going to live and work in America as the head of a large company. Jody would have gone crazy with delight when I told her, since we were both still talking about how great we had a great time there and how we would like to return. But never in a million years did I expect to return on such terms. I listened in amazement as he quickly outlined the package they were offering me, a salary I could hardly understand, stock options, a corporate BMW, an apartment until we found one for ourselves. It just went on and on. Well, you need to catch a plane, young man, he finished. Perhaps you will tell me your decision when you return from vacation, and you will have time to discuss it with your wife. I'll give it to you now, I stammered. I agree, and I am absolutely sure that my wife will agree. We both stood up and shook hands, and Butch shooed me away so I could pick up my wife and catch a plane. I left with my head in the clouds, checking if I still had time. It would have been difficult, but I took out my cell phone when I went to the parking lot and dialed my home number. It rang. Well, that would be it, wouldn't it? But then it rang and rang and rang. There was no response. I checked the time and found that 2 minutes had passed after the time when I originally said I would be coming home. By that time, I had already reached my car and, putting the key in the ignition, automatically dialed Jody's mobile phone number. I didn't even have time to start the car when she answered. "Where the hell are you?" she shouted into the phone. "On the way home, honey," I replied. "And wait until you hear what I have to tell you." "Damn you, Dave, you bastard," she interrupted me. "You don't give a damn about me, do you?" I was speechless for a moment, but unfortunately she didn't. "Your damn job is all you think about. You don't care about me. I had to call Terry to give me a ride to the airport because I knew you wouldn't show up on time." "Terry?" "Oh yes, that must be Terry Jones, the art teacher she works with. The Flash is a bastard who thinks he knows all this. The fact that Jody had exchanged kisses with him when I had angered her earlier hardly made me like him. "Jody," I begged her. "I'm practically on our way now, and I'm only 3 or 4 minutes later than I said." "Cool, Dave," Jody replied. "I'm already halfway to the airport. If you're not here, I'll go without you." She disconnected, and despite my attempts to call her back, there was no response. I checked the time and thought how stupid it all was. I still had enough time to get to the airport, so I turned the car around and headed toward Stansted, arriving there, as I predicted, at least half an hour later. I parked, took my parking ticket, and headed to the departure terminal, hoping that at least Jody had thought to take my suitcase with her. I searched and searched, but I couldn't find her, and by that time there were fewer and fewer. Eventually I went to the front desk and asked if my wife had already checked in. "Oh yes, that's it," the pretty blonde said after reviewing her list. "She booked the room about 15 minutes ago, Mrs. Martin and Mr. Jones. They have seats numbered 24B and C. What? My initial reaction scared the poor girl, and I had to apologize for my outburst. "There must have been some mistake," I said. "Mrs. Martin, but not Mr. Jones." The girl saw that I was very upset about something and rechecked everything for me. "No, that's right," she finally confirmed to me. "The tickets were booked in the name of Mr. and Mrs. Martin, but Mrs. Martin changed one of them to Mr. Jones." "Can she do it?" I muttered, unable to believe what I had heard. "Yes," the girl replied, starting to feel sorry for me, realizing that some strange event was happening. There would have been a fee of £40 for that, but she obviously paid it. I was standing there like some kind of refugee or something, not knowing what to say or what to do. "He had his passport with him, Mr. Martin," she added apologetically. "So it turned out to be a piece of cake." I thanked her for her concern and trudged unhappily away from the table. What's happening? What the hell is she up to? It wasn't just a joke. Looking at the departure board, it was immediately obvious that the plane had not yet taken off, and for that matter, they had not even boarded. I rushed forward to try to get to the boarding gate, but I couldn't get through the counter to the departure lounge. There is no boarding ticket. Entry is prohibited. That was clear. I argued and persuaded, but when it became obvious that they were going to call security, I gave up, went to the bar, and sat there with my head in my hands. I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe it. My world turned upside down within half an hour. Jody couldn't. No, she couldn't really go to Spain with that damn Terry Jones instead of me. It was impossible. Please, someone tell me that it just wasn't possible and that I had a dream. And then an idea came to my mind. Not very good, as it turned out, but it seemed so at the time. Hurrying to the other side of the airport, I eventually reached the observation hall. In the old days, it might have been an outdoor terrace, but in these days of terrorism, we had to look at airplanes through huge mirrored windows. To my complete surprise, I noticed her. My wife, my Jody, is making her way across the tarmac to a waiting Boeing 737. Of course, I couldn't help but notice her. Few of the women had loose blonde hair and such a slender figure as hers. Then I saw Damn Jones get off the courtesy bus behind her and follow her to a waiting plane. When he caught up with her, I was completely enraged, because even at that distance I could barely miss the way he wrapped his arms around her slender waist, no more than I could miss her when she leaned back and kissed him on the cheek. The guards, I suppose, were just doing their job. I know I shouldn't have been banging on the glass window like a madman, and I shouldn't have screamed like that. There was absolutely no chance they could hear me at that distance anyway, and in any case, Jody didn't even look back. They eventually released me from the detention center without charge when they decided I no longer posed a potential threat to other passengers, and I sullenly headed back to my car. I tried calling Jody on her cell phone, but of course it was a waste of time. What a mess. What a fucking mess. I think I cried that night, but I'm not sure because I was so drunk by the time I staggered home from the local pub that I couldn't be sure of anything. I couldn't even call her in Spain because I didn't have a number and her mobile phone wouldn't work in another country. Around noon the next day, I came to my senses when the phone rang loudly next to me. I realized that I had fallen asleep on the couch, clutching the phone tightly to me. Why? I have no idea. "Hi," I mumbled into the phone, not knowing what to expect. "Is that you, Dave?" My wife's sharp voice rang out, sounding just like the schoolteacher she was. "Yes," I said simply. Well, what?" I replied. "Then no apologies, motherfucker," Jody spat at me. "Don't you care that you let me down again?" "Did I let you down?" My question followed, but she kept saying that I didn't care about her feelings, and I was thinking more about my job than about her. "What about the fact that you didn't come to dinner with our new neighbors because of some stupid problem at your school?" I reminded her rather pointlessly. And in any case, I arrived at the airport on time. "This is different, Dave, and you know it," she shouted into the phone, although from my point of view it certainly wasn't like that. I realized that we were just yelling at each other for no purpose and tried to change tactics. Having just woken up, I still hadn't fully recovered and had forgotten half of what had happened the night before, and tried to tell her about Butch's proposal. "Jody," I said more calmly, "I have to tell you something about my work. I was offered—" "Here we go again," Jody said, starting off again. "Your job, your damn job, is all you ever think about. What about me here in Spain, alone?" It was only then that it all came flooding back to me, and suddenly my love for Jody felt like it was starting to dissolve. "On your own, Jody?" I asked. "What about Terry Bloody Jones?" She paused on the other end of the line, clearly stunned that I knew he was with her. "What about him?" she asked in a calmer tone. "So you're still in bed with him?" I went on. There was another period of silence, and then she answered. "What if it is? You deserve it, you bastard. It's all your fault." "Was he good then, damn it?" I asked angrily. "Better than you, Dave," Jody replied angrily. "So rip out your heart, Mr. Nobody." The line went dead when she hung up, or more likely when it happened, she dropped it. If my marriage wasn't dead yet, then maybe, just maybe, this last comment would end it. The next morning, although not too early, I found George in his office discussing a new job. He was a little surprised that I was not in Spain, but I evaded a direct answer. "Why didn't you mention it?" I demanded. "I couldn't," he protested. "Not before he met you properly and decided you were the man." "Thank you very much," I continued. "Maybe it cost me my marriage." I continued to tell him my sad story, but to my surprise, he did not express much surprise. My husband is always the last to know Dave, George finally managed to tell me. What does this mean? It's nothing special, Dave, he added. But your wife Jody was at the last two events of the company. Well, let's just say she was flaunting herself. What the hell do you mean by that? But he just shrugged, and I slowly came to my own conclusions. Damn it. Who was this woman that I loved and was married to all these years? Wait until you see my Lynn, George remarked with a smile on his face, trying to change the subject. Who is this? I asked, not showing much interest in my other problems. May Lynn, she's every man's wet dream. Wet sleep? I asked, completely at a loss. She's your new secretary. Sorry, personal assistant, he told me with pleasure. An Asian American. I met her last month when I was there. I just stared at him. Lucky bastard, he said thoughtfully. Wait until you see her. You lose one, you get another. The next few days passed in a blur, partly because of my family problems, but also because of the speed with which my transfer took place. No matter how eager one of them was to get me out there and work for him, the other also insisted that the license be formalized. It felt like my feet were barely touching the floor. Then Jody called again. I knew she would show up, and somehow I knew it would be in the middle of the morning. Hello, my love, she greeted me. I thought I'd call you to let you know how wonderful it is here. I have to tell you something, Jody, I began as before. Don't pay attention to this lover, she interrupted me again. You're not ready to apologize for your attitude yet, honey. Listen, Jody, I tried to say, ignoring her silly comments. I really have something to tell you. I'm sorry, love, Jody interjected, although I didn't make much effort to straddle her. I still love you dearly, and when you're ready to apologize, then we'll get on with our lives. But for now I have someone else I can make happy. I just hung up, although I'm not sure she didn't beat me to it. Jody seemed drunk. Not drunk to the point of insanity, but apart from trying to get something reasonable out of her. If she thought making love to an art teacher was more important than a chance at our future together, then that was her problem, not mine. The week went on, the most unusual week in my life. On the one hand, the most exciting, and on the other, the saddest. How would it end? The next call from Jody was an even bigger surprise. It came early in the morning. Hi, Dave, she murmured. I've been thinking. How did you know Terry was here with me? I saw you boarding the plane together, I told her, trying to get my sleep, infected brain in order, surprised that she would call me at such an hour to ask me such a question. You were there, Dave. Were you really there? Of course I was there, Jody, I told her, starting to lose my temper. How the hell do you think I found out that bastard Jones was with you? Why didn't you stop us, Dave? Why didn't you do anything? Do what? I said, almost shouting into the phone. I got there in time for the flight, but you already took the tickets and went through it with your damn boyfriend, and they wouldn't let me through. As a result, I was arrested. But I thought you weren't coming, Dave. Terry gave me a ride to the airport, and in a fit of anger, I asked him to come with me. To be honest, I didn't know you were there, honey. And your damn friend Terry just happened to take his luggage and passport with him, didn't he? I stung her. Oh, shit. Oh, Dave, I am. But I hung up before she could continue. I think she called me a few more times, but I either wasn't at home, being too busy making preparations, or maybe I just didn't answer. Eventually, a few days later, I picked up the phone. Hi, is that you, Dave? I heard. Yes, Jody, it's me, I replied. What do you want? You, Dave, I want you. Terry was such a bastard, and I need you. I mumbled something incoherent. I went back to my room last night, and there was some fool with him, Jody cried. Well, how terrible it is for you. You can imagine that, she continued, not catching the sarcasm in my remark. How could anyone do something like that, Dave? It's hard to imagine, I replied, trying not to laugh. But walking away with someone else like that behind my back, she muttered, and I realized she was a little drunk again. How could he? It's terrible, I replied in the most sympathetic tone I could muster. Dave, I'm coming home early. I can't take it anymore. I'm going back to Heathrow tomorrow at 4 o'clock. It was the only flight I could get on. Can you pick me up? I started to say no, when it suddenly occurred to me that I could. Of course I could. I'll see you at 4 o'clock, I said shortly. You were trying to tell me something the other day when I called, Dave, she surprised me. Was there something like that in your work? Oh, it's nothing important, Jody, I told her. I don't want to bother you with my work. She'll find out in due course anyway. I was ready to meet her by 2:30 and got a little angry when her plane landed 20 minutes late. When she entered the arrivals hall, I was waiting for her there like an obedient husband. I'm pretty sure I even had a smile on my face. "Hi, Dave, my darling, I'm so glad to see you," she shouted when she saw me there, and throwing down her suitcase, hugged me and kissed me with all the energy she was capable of. I must say, she really looked amazing. The tan always suited Jody, and her blonde hair set it off. "Let's go home, honey," Jody whispered to me. "I've missed you so much, and I can't wait to get you into bed and make up with you." All thoughts of asking me to apologize seemed to have passed by. She seemed to love me again. "Let's have coffee or a cup of tea first," I suggested. "No, let's go home right away," my wife insisted. "Let's have a drink first," I insisted and took her to a nearby cafe. "Did you have a good rest, Jody?" I asked, ordering coffee for her and tea for myself. "It started fine," she replied softly. "I'm sorry if I overdid it a little." "Is Terry not as good in bed as you thought at the time?" Jody looked at me sadly, and a single tear slowly rolled down her cheek. "Not really," she began to tell me. "Then I caught the bastard in bed with one of the maids, in my bed in my room. I forgot to point out that they shared the room in question, and that in any case, strictly speaking, it was our bed and our room. I paid for this damn vacation. Can you believe that, Dave?" she continued. "We were supposed to be on vacation together, and he left, used someone else, and left me alone. It must have been difficult for you, my dear." I sympathized. After all, I knew how she felt. "Anyway, damn him, he'll get what he deserves. Can we go home now, please, Dave? I'm desperately trying to make it up to you." I tried to tell her that I had tried to tell her about my news several times, but each time she cut me off. "It can wait, Dave," she interrupted again. "Let's go back home and you can tell me on the way." I didn't really need to think about it. My decision was made a long time ago. "Here are the car keys, Jody," I told her, arriving in her old car. My company car had returned to Alscan's the day before. "And here are the keys to the house. They're all yours." "By ours, you mean Dave, don't you?" "No, just your Jody, just yours," I explained to her. "Everything has been handed over to you, and all bills have been paid by the end of the month. If you decide to sell it, then you should have enough money left to pay for another couple of weeks in Spain." Jody looked at me blankly, not understanding what I was saying to her. "And by the way, I noticed that one of your tires is almost bald, and there is a strange noise coming from the gearbox." Jody continued to stare at me blankly. "What I was trying to tell you, Jody," I continued. "The fact is that I was offered a fantastic job in America. Great salary, excellent benefits, everything I've ever dreamed of." A huge smile appeared on Jody's face when she heard the news. This saddened me somewhat. "When are we going there?" she asked enthusiastically, forgetting about our conversation a few minutes earlier. "I'm leaving on the BA flight in 40 minutes, Jody," I told her. "Do you have a ticket for me too?" "What is it?" she asked excitedly. "No," I said. "Then when will I follow you?" Jody continued. "You're not flying, Jody," I told her. "I'm sorry, but you're not doing this." 10 minutes later, I walked into the departure lounge on my own, leaving Jody sobbing heartily at the counter, beyond which the authorities would not let her pass. My last sight, ever. There was her tear-stained face as she stood there and watched me walk out of her life. Ironically, it was a feeling of déjà vu. Just 10 days or so ago, it was me standing here, unable to follow the man I loved. A different airport and a different destination, but I'm sure the heartbreak was at least as hard. 9 years, 3 months, and 6 days ahead. I returned to Heathrow, to the very terminal I left many years ago. By no means the first time I returned, but this time I had been there for 2 weeks and planned to stay much longer. The licensing agreement with Butch's company in Huntingdon, USA, was an absolute success, and I rose through the ranks to become the director of this division of his company and the owner of a large stake. Butch has long been a personal friend of mine, and in another twist of fate, it was through him that George approached me with a request to return to the UK and take up the post of managing director of Alscan's. He was retiring. The company has grown a lot since I left, largely due to the relationship with us in America, who were able to open their products to a much larger market. It made sense for everyone, and especially for me, since along with the position, I would eventually also acquire a significant part of this company. I was waiting in the arrivals area for an old colleague from Butch's company, who helped me a lot from the very beginning. although I don't actually work there anymore. It was great to know that he would be joining me in the UK. Even before I noticed her myself, I sensed her arrival, as almost every man in the waiting crowd perked up when he saw her, and probably sucked in his tummies. My Lynn was as beautiful as the day I first saw her, maybe even more, and her smile seemed to light up the entire terminal when she noticed that I was waiting for her. Leaning over to her two fellow travelers, she pointed at me and they both rushed to me. Dad, I've missed you so much, Maddie, our 5-year-old daughter, exclaimed as she jumped into my arms. She was a miniature version of her mother and had already left behind several heartbroken boys when she went to live in the UK. Hi, Dad, my 8-year-old son greeted a little less spontaneously, but the smile on his face said it all. He was already tall for his age, and I couldn't wait to see how he moved from the American style of football to the European version of football. Maybe one day he will play for Arsenal, the first day of our new life. My beautiful wife greeted me, holding out her hand to kiss me. Indeed, how true it is.